Tonight's story begins with a man who hides inside other people's homes, a silent intruder who thinks he's found the perfect house. But the couple who live there aren't victims, they're predators. And in their immaculate, window-locked mansion, the PHROGGER becomes the prey. This is the story of a leech who found hosts more vile than himself. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. None so vile. I set out shortly after my 16th birthday. Nothing more than a broken child, fleeing an equally broken home. I honestly doubt they even bothered to file a missing persons report. They most certainly wouldn't have missed my presence. The violence of those years are a story told through the plethora of scars etched throughout my skin. It's strange how the deepest of scars, the emotional ones, show no obvious outward signs. That type of trauma is only present in my interactions with others. I grew to fear human contact over the years. I had safety in my reclusivity. I rarely left the sanctity of my room back then. Despite how it may seem, I'm not fishing for sympathy here. My childhood is merely pertinent to how I got to where I am today. My formative years made the unpredictability and dangers associated with the life of a vagabond seem all too appealing. I was so hopeful the day I first set out. It felt liberating at first. Everything seemed so new to me. There was a level of freedom like I had never experienced. It was so refreshing. For once, I felt like I was in control, like I mattered. The good times were fleeting, however. The reality of life as a wanderer is a harsh one. If I am being honest, it was only a marginal improvement to the life I had left. Hunger was a constant. I busked for money mostly. I never felt like I was deserving of a handout. When the money ran thin, I stole what I needed to survive. Always from big box retailers. I didn't have the heart to rip off a small business, no matter how much my stomach ached. I was fortunate in some regards, however. I didn't seem to experience any of the nastier realities of the road that so many others seem to face. I was never assaulted or robbed, nor did I develop an addiction to feed in addition to my hunger. The truth is, I just missed my creature comforts. I despised being cold and wet. I missed my bed, regular bathing. I loathed the bugs that swarmed me with every fiber of my being. Nothing compared to the treatment I received from other people, though. They were even more loathsome than the insects. I never minded those who walked by without so much as a glance. I was fine with being invisible. It was the sympathetic stares that were somehow more aggravating. I didn't need anyone to feel bad for me. I felt bad for them, wrenched each day from their natural sleep cycles by a morning alarm. Hustling through bumper-to-bumper traffic to eagerly participate in the rat race that is this late-stage capitalist hellscape. They weren't any more free than I, and their lack of awareness made it even more infuriating. Only a select few really thrive in this system, and they all seem to share a common disgust with folks like me. To the wealthy, there are none so vile as those unhoused. It was a mutual feeling. I could never understand the level of greed and narcissism required to attain their lifestyle. So strange it is to have so much and yet desire even more. I hated them all. I vividly remember the day the thought first crossed my mind. It rained as I walked. Not a heavy enough rain to warrant taking shelter, but certainly enough to be annoying. I strolled damp and miserable through an absolutely soulless Midwestern suburban development. You know the type. Hastily thrown up cookie-cutter boxes in what was once a thriving and beautiful woods. I grimaced at the massive skeletons of 2x4 frames that dotted the freshly paved cul-de-sacs. I wondered why anybody needed so much square footage. It seemed as though the families that occupied such homes would rarely even encounter one another, existing in their own little bubbles under a shared roof. That type of grandiose space could even allow an occupant to exist entirely unnoticed. I have never really identified with the term PHROGGER. I see how it applies to so many others in my field, hopping about from home to home in order to avoid detection. Not me. I always considered myself more of a leech. When I find a worthy host, I latch on for the long haul. It's not easy. This lifestyle requires skill, and some careful scouting. Not just any family or home will do. I tend to gravitate towards new builds. Their floorboards and steps are so free of creaks. Their crawl spaces and attics are tidy and void of pesky insects. The larger and more excessive the home, the easier it is to hide. The family dynamic is even more crucial. I've learned to target newer families with grade school-age children. With more mouths to feed comes fuller-stocked pantries and fridges. Those snot-nosed little brats don't exactly keep a hard inventory on fruit snacks either. Food just simply disappears, and no one's the wiser. I learned a great deal from my first home. It would be the last time I sought a house with a teenage resident. Once a kid hits middle school, I suddenly am not the only one creeping around at night. Not exactly ideal to head downstairs for a midnight snack only to encounter little Jimmy sneaking his girlfriend in through the back door, you know what I mean? I'll never forget returning back to that first house in the middle of the night. I was coming back from a quick trip into town, as I so often do. I always entered the home by scaling a deck banister onto the roof. As soon as I peeked my head above the gutter, I made eye contact with the teenage daughter of the house. That little delinquent was exhaling a cloud of weed smoke outside her bedroom window. I expected her to scream when she saw me. I think she was just as scared of getting caught as I was. Neither of us said a word. I simply climbed back off the roof and left them for good. I always carried my few personal belongings in a backpack when I left the safety of my hideaway. Even if the house was empty, you never know when you are going to have to dart out a door and away for good. I wonder if that little stoner ever told her parents of the encounter. I'd guess not. My last family was my favorite. 2 young children no more than 5 or 6, either at school or glued to some sort of electronic device 24/7. God, were they so blissfully unaware at all times. Most people are when they are at home, their locked doors giving them a beautiful false sense of security. I walked about unbothered, even when they were home. The parents had extremely busy schedules. Between work and the kids' activities, they were hardly even home. It's amazing how little quality time most people spend in the home. They are either working, sleeping, running errands, or attending social outings. There is hardly time to appreciate the sprawling homes in which they reside, ideal for someone like me. My love for this game goes beyond the comfort of a climate-controlled place to lay head, however. It is more than just a meal ticket or a hot shower. Being a Frogger is a thrill that even eclipses that of life on the road. The fear of detection is like a drug. Each successful nighttime trip to the fridge or daytime toilet flush is a rush. Sure, I have grown bolder with my success over time, but the thrill is always there. I'll never forget the vulnerability of my first shower. I listened with my head outside the curtain the entire time, terrified someone would return home. Now I sing to myself. I hated having to say goodbye to my last family. I had no choice in the matter. My fate was sealed the day they arrived home with that pesky mutt. For anyone with the irrational fear of living with a Frogger, please know there is no greater deterrent than man's best friend. Perhaps I could have befriended it during the day, attempted to log the schedules of the dog walkers like I did the rest of the family. It just felt like too high a risk, so away I went. It was a miserable 2 months on the road that followed my departure. I had grown soft and pampered in that home. Perhaps that attributed to my lapse in judgment with selecting my current residence. It seemed so perfect at first. A standalone monster of a new build, seated on a heavily wooded cul-de-sac. It was the biggest and most extravagant home that I had encountered yet. There were no nosy neighbors within view of any window. It checked every box from the outside. Now all I had to do was meet the owners. I was shocked on moving day to find the house would only have 2 occupants. Of course, I had toured it prior. 7 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. It seemed rather excessive for just 2 people. I watched intently from my post in the woods as they directed the movers around each spacious room. They were such physically beautiful people. Both appeared to be in their early 30s and dressed like they just walked out of a J. Crew catalog. I despised them immediately. The real deciding factor would be my observations of their schedules over the following weeks. A stay-at-home trophy spouse would have been an obvious deal-breaker. Fortunately for me, they both worked similar and predictable schedules. The woman was the first out the door at 6:45, followed by her husband at 7:30. She returned at around 3:20 each day, an 8-hour workday and about a 15-minute commute each direction. His commute seemed a little less convenient, or perhaps he just had longer days. He was lucky to make it back before 5. I could work with this. Their seemingly busy social life was a cherry on top. I moved in on a Monday after they had both left. A large backyard oak tree gave me an easy route to a slightly sloped section of roof along the back of the house. In my experience, people rarely lock any second-story window. These two bozos were no exception. I had already scouted several possible hideaways during my initial tour of the place. The prime location being a long L-shaped crawl space inside the closet of the largest upstairs bedroom. It was ideal. Far from the downstairs master bedroom, directly above the garage so I could hear them come and go. Hell, it even had its own ensuite. The crawl space was exactly as I had hoped it to be. Stuffed full of boxes of belongings in which they would never open, yet could not possibly let go of or, heaven forbid, donate. It was easy enough to get around the corner of the space. I simply needed to stack a few boxes to have enough room to lay down. I was officially home. I wasted no time exploring what they had done to the place. The first peculiar detail being the large closet in which the crawl space was attached. I thought at first that it was merely an overflow closet for the man of the house. It contained a wide array of different men's clothing, which in itself was nothing special. What caught my attention was how varied it all was, not only in style, but also in size. When you have been a Frogger as long as I have, you notice patterns in the clothing people wear. I could almost tell you a person's life story with a single walkthrough of their wardrobe. So many of these pieces just didn't seem to fit his style or frame. Much of it seemed too utilitarian for him to be caught dead in. My growling stomach quickly snapped me out of my curious state of mind, however. I began to slowly make my way to the kitchen, stopping to admire pictures or judge various pieces of furniture. In my experience, wealth rarely equates to tasteful interior decor. These two sure knew how to pick a gaudy piece, let me tell you. Thankfully, the kitchen was stocked to the brim. How wasteful they were, even with daily pilfering from yours truly. I could tell much of the food would go to waste. What a shame with how many mouths go unfed each day. I watched some sports highlights on the kitchen television as I sat and ate on the massive white granite island. Nobody loves a boring and sterile white kitchen like the rich. That backsplash is fucked, I muttered to myself as I bit into my sandwich. If only they would have let me have a say in the decorating. God knows they needed the input. I finished lunch at a leisurely pace and set about charging my phone and finding the Wi-Fi password. This was the fourth home in which I lived as a Frogger. It was also the fourth home to have both the Wi-Fi network and password written on the back of the router. Some things are just too easy. I used the ensuite in my room and then returned to my little hideout a few hours before the missus was due to arrive home. You never know when someone might get out a little early after all. The first few days went by without a hitch. They stuck to their schedules and I to mine. On Friday, neither of them left for work. I had fortunately built a small stockpile from the pantry to sustain myself in instances like this. I just hated the boredom more than anything. They apparently had some home improvement plans for the day. I scrolled social media as I listened to various power tools buzzing about. It must have been quite the project they seemed to stop in nearly every room in the house. My nerves spiked as I heard the door to my room open. Much to my surprise, it was the two of them who entered and began to work. People of their status almost never do their own jobs. It's like they are allergic to manual labor. I smiled to myself as I imagined him getting a $200 scarf tangled around a drill bit. I couldn't wait to judge the shoddiness of their work when I could finally emerge from my refuge. The two of them played contractor for a few more hours after finishing up in my room. Eventually, I gave up on the prospect of them leaving for the night and decided to sleep away my boredom. My ancient phone had finally decided to quit working, and I didn't feel like starting a book. There was nothing left to do now but wait. The sound of the garage door stirred me from my slumber early the next morning. I peeked carefully through my blinds to the welcomed sight of the two of them heading down the driveway in her BMW. I was certain a brunch date awaited them. I, on the other hand, was happy to eat in. I quickly scanned the room for the source of the previous day's commotion. Nothing appeared out of place, until I took a second glance at the window. My heart skipped a beat at the sight of it. Those bastards had put a key lock on the inside of the window! My mind raced as I tried to find the logic behind the installation. The windows already had standard locks before. The same locks they hadn't thought to close to keep me out. This would only serve to keep someone inside from getting out. Panic set in. I raced frantically about the upstairs, checking every room on the floor. To my dismay, they all had the same locks. They had to be on to me. Why not just call the police if they wanted me gone? I nearly fell down the grand staircase in a mad dash to the front door, an exit I would normally never dream of using. Locked. I continued my desperate sprint to each and every door and window on the ground floor to no avail. In a single day, they had effectively transformed the space into a 5,000 square foot prison. This sort of dread had not been instilled in me since I had set out from my childhood home. Even then, I had always had a way out. This was something different. I was like a rat in a cage. Suddenly, the harmless visions of the two of them at brunch began to morph into something more sinister. I could picture them shopping for weapons to use on me when they returned. Oh, look, honey, a scythe. I felt sick to my stomach. You don't survive on the streets as long as I have, without being resourceful. I did my best in that moment to calm myself down. My anxiety was getting the better of me. I didn't know how much time remained until they would pull back into the driveway, but I knew panicking would not help me one bit. I decided that my only option would be to break one of the windows. I hated to leave any trace of my presence behind, but what choice did I have? It seemed simple enough. I scoured every inch of that ground floor for something solid to use to smash the glass. My lack of options was astounding. The garage containing all the tools was locked. There wasn't so much as an umbrella in any closet. No baseball bat or crowbar, absolutely nothing of use. It was as if the entire house had been cleared of any object remotely resembling a weapon. Even the kitchen was void of anything more lethal than a butter knife. The lack of anything to defend myself fit in with this new narrative I was building in my panicked mind. They were to return armed like a militia, and I could do no more than hurl a couch cushion at them. I paced the white-tiled kitchen floor like a madman, doing everything in my power to control my breathing. I couldn't shake the image of them turning into the neighborhood and approaching the house, weapons in hand. It was like an imaginary clock was slowly ticking down inside my head. "Get a fucking grip, Kevin," I shouted to myself, banging both of my closed fists off the side of my head. I was seconds away from tears when I laid my eyes on the 4 aluminum bar stools that flanked one side of the marble island. Without hesitation, I grabbed the nearest one. It was light, but should do the trick. I selected the nearest ground floor window and swung at it with every fiber of my adrenaline-fueled being. The stool bounced off the glass repeatedly, leaving no more than a small smudge. It was shatterproof glass. I would break the stool before the window gave out. I placed it back where I found it and resumed my frantic pacing about the first floor. I had scoured every inch of that place for a weapon and had come up empty-handed. If smashing my way out wasn't an option, then maybe there was a key. I continued my search as calm and collected as a man on fire. I ripped open drawers, checked closets. I even stopped to peer under the front doormat. I had to be fast, but I still took care to leave everything as I found it. Perhaps the couple wasn't aware of my presence, and there was some other motive behind the wide array of locks? Maybe one of them was a sleepwalker? Who knows? The problem with such a large house is that no matter how quietly you move about, there are areas of the house where things like a garage door opening are not audible. I heard them after they had entered the kitchen. I froze in the middle of the living room like a deer in the headlights. The trendy open concept of the home put me in a direct line of sight with the woman of the house. Thank God her focus was on finding a bottle of wine in the fridge, and not on me. I tiptoed to the nearest closet, carefully shutting the door to avoid detection. I could hear them jubilantly speaking with another man as the wine cork popped. "You have such a wonderful home," the mystery man proclaimed. I could tell from his speech that this glass of wine was not his first drink of the day. "Well, thank you. We were quite taken with it, weren't we, Ann?" she replied with her pleasant demeanor projecting into the tiny closet in which I hid. "I think Maybe we should enjoy this bottle of wine on the deck, the husband chimed in, mirroring her same joyful tone. I waited patiently, listening for the sound of the door to the deck to close. I contemplated following them out and leaping over the side of the deck to escape. It was a risky plan. With the two men outside, they could easily overpower me. I wondered if they locked the garage door when they came in. It certainly felt like a safer bet. I paused before exiting the closet, taking in a few deep breaths in an attempt to slow my racing heart. There were multiple enormous windows along the deck that would give them a clear view into the living room where I hid. I knew I had to be fast. I slowly cracked the closet door, giving myself just enough space to peek out towards the deck. I could see the three of them sitting there, blissfully distracted with one another's company. I slithered out cautiously, my back firmly pressed to the wall behind me. I never took my eyes off of them as I backed around the corner. It felt like my heartbeats could be heard a full city block away. The tension of waiting for the moment one of them glanced into the living room was palpable. It felt like an eternity, but I finally made it to the corner and out of sight. I breathed a small sigh of relief. I made a break for the garage, my final hope of escape. My heart sank as I attempted to turn the doorknob. The diligence in which they locked up was like nothing I had ever experienced. Left with no other option, I retreated to the safety of the crawl space, like the rat I am. There was no other option but to do what has always come natural to me: hide. I felt so deflated as I sulked behind the stacks of cardboard boxes which walled me into that dark space. I was reminded of the hopelessness that had plagued my home life as a boy. It was the same feeling, that of a prisoner. I wallowed in my self-loathing for the better part of an hour when I heard the bedroom door open. I clasped my hand over my mouth, doing everything in my power not to make a sound. Drunken laughter filled the air. A symphony of inebriation echoed about the tall, vaulted ceilings of the bedroom. I could hear the third man's slurred speech as he sat on the bed. "You guys are really into this, huh?" he said with a conveyance of skepticism. The wife replied in a soft and assuring tone. "You have nothing to worry about, sweetie. There's no jealousy here. We just like to have a little fun, all." "So you just like to watch?" he followed up. I began to cringe as the reality of the situation set in. The husband laughed, but his voice quickly took on a serious tone. "Just pretend like I'm not here." I had never regretted having ears like I did at that moment. The paper-thin walls might as well have not existed. It was like I was right there in the room with them. "Let's really spice this up," the wife's voice echoed as she unlocked a dresser drawer and slid it open. I could hear the sounds of chains rattle as she continued on. "I like to be in control, if that's okay with you." "I won't bite too hard." The third man nervously laughed and reluctantly agreed before being cut off mid-sentence. My stomach churned as I heard them kiss. "Just lay back and relax," she giggled as the handcuffs snapped into place. "Such a sturdy headboard," she proclaimed. "It's okay if I use a gag, right?" Her question seemed to startle the now helpless man. No, I don't think that's pow," he began before being abruptly shushed. His pleas were quickly morphed into a more muffled sound as he struggled violently against his restraints. Consent had left the situation. My initial grossed-out discontentment with what was transpiring was replaced by genuine concern for his well-being. I could hear an excited and heavy breathing coming from the husband now as his wife cackled. "Oh, calm down, dear. You're gonna hurt your poor wrists." The sound of the handcuffs wrenching against the wooden headboard and his muffled cries for help fell on unempathetic ears. I could hear the woman excitedly skipping across the bedroom floor. The sound of a plastic bag flapping open and catching air cut through his cries. "Ever heard of breath play?" she giggled as she approached the bed. "Don't forget your safe word." His struggling intensified as she placed the bag over his head. "I know how I look in this situation. Sitting idly by as a man is, tortured mere feet from where I hid. I truly wanted to help him. I really did. If my phone was working, I would have called 911 already. Running to his aid would do no more than put me into the same situation as him. Most people have a flight or fight instinct. Mine is more of a curl up into a ball and become a human punching bag instinct. The amount of abuse I have endured over the years is a true testament to that fact. If I cannot stand up for myself, how could I stand up for him? I am a coward, not a monster. He inhaled deeply through his nose as she removed the bag. You see, a good sub divided by dom relationship is built on trust. You trust me, don't you, honey? She remarked as she snapped the bag back over his helpless head. She continued this process with much glee, removing the bag long enough for him to take a breath and utter a muffled plea before smothering him again. Should we let this one run around, honey? She remarked over the sound of the struggling man. Her husband seemed to ponder the question for a moment, before replying, I'd rather not clean up the mess today. Her question brought back a forgotten childhood memory. I used to have this sweet orange tabby cat when I was really young. He was such an affectionate little thing, always hopping in my bed each morning for a quick snuggle. His kindness did not extend towards Earth's smaller creatures, however. He loved to bring a variety of different woodland critters inside the home, usually alive. It seemed so sadistic to me at the time. I suppose it still does. He could have put them out of their misery with ease, but he loved to prolong the torture. He must have found amusement in watching them attempt to evade him in their final moments. His games eventually would come to an end, however. He would either grow bored and finally put an end to whatever animal he had drug in, or they would simply lose the will to fight anymore and accept their demise. The poor man handcuffed to that bed never gave up his fight. Maybe us humans are incapable of the same sort of acceptance of fate that animals are. He struggled until the bitter end, his hands pulled at his restraints, his feet flailed wildly. His death was as assured as any of the mice at the mercy of my childhood cat. Much like him, the woman must have grown bored because his struggle finally ceased. His death seemed to only spur the two of them on. I was forced to listen in horror to the two of them fucking, on the very bed in which he was restrained. I vomited into my sleeping bag as a result. I tried to be quiet. I doubt they could have heard it regardless. They were making quite a racket as they went at it. I know there will be no healing from the trauma of this day. Hopefully I will live long enough to at the very least attempt to move on, but I doubt I will live much longer if I am being honest. The 3 days since he died have been the longest of my life. The two of them have seemed to move on like nothing happened. They left the following day with a body in their trunk, and returned with a carload of groceries in its place. Their work schedules resumed as normal that Monday. His clothes hung like a trophy in the same closet as the others. She comes in periodically and sniffs them. I still cannot find a way out from this fortress of a home. A jogger ran around the cul-de-sac yesterday. I hollered and banged on the front window, but she never so much as glanced at my direction. Damn AirPods. Sometimes I think they have no knowledge that I am here. Other times I feel I am an unwilling participant in a drawn-out game of cat and mouse. I do as I always have. I hunker down when they are home and try every exit when they leave. I started praying again, a practice that I had ceased as a child. God still seems to find silence when I cry out, just as he did back then. Maybe one day they will slip up and leave a window open or a door unlocked. Perhaps I could get lucky and grab the attention of a passerby. If I am being honest, I will likely grow tired of this game and walk out into the open like a wounded rat unwilling to continue its struggle against a murderous cat. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.